you're still somewhere in Vancouver and you've got like a whole bunch of minions that you direct to do this right there in the office. And but in fact, a lot of things have changed, and you've got to work with new people, and you guys have got to get this process smoothed out. And obviously there will be hiccups as you go along, but this then to have a vision of how you see the release process work, and how do you see the back and forth with this team, for instance, as it comes to features and whatnot, and communication towards the community, heads up for things that are happening. That's, I think, some stuff that we can that we should put it this way, that we should put out there, because the last thing I want is to see you get pummeled by the community because this is we don't like this, because the last thing we need is that you get afraid to hit like boom, release. That's that as soon as you press release, there's going to be an inbox full of angry emails and whatnot. So yeah, got to find a way for all of us to work together that way.
No, I appreciate that, Peter. I'll totally be, I think that's in my mind as well to talk about at the summit, because you mentioned the last time, and it's even more important, I think, given how things are changing. So it's important to keep the communication open and have the information to people ahead of time, right? So
yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Having said that, I mean, a lot of I had to re-release DMX very quickly, although of course chances are no one is actually going in production yet with 9.2, but yeah, you never know. And I checked the methods that I had to replace, and indeed they were like pre DNN7, so that for me is fine. But I would love to open a discussion within this group about a let's say more formally laid out deprecation and removal process for the API, because I think we all agree that we're dragging all these dead methods along, and we really want to get module developers weaned off using bad old methods. Otherwise we'll never be able to transform this framework. So having said that, Clint, that's something I definitely want to add to the agenda if that's possible.
Yeah, so I don't have any agenda for this meeting again. I'm just kind of facilitating. I did see where Sean accepted, like, that he was going to attend, but obviously he's not here yet, so he may be, coming. So you guys feel free to run it however, whatever we need to discuss.
Is everyone okay with discussing that item of because that was like 500 methods that were ripped out this time, and to see how we should go about it in the future. The proposal I put forward, and maybe that's a good starting point for discussion, is if you deprecate a method, that method will actually physically kind of disappear from the code base in N+2 major versions, something like that, or 3 major versions. We discussed the exact time frame, but that when you have a .0.0 release, that is the moment to kind of radically cut out all the old methods that have been in there. And the reason I say that, the reasoning behind it, is that if it happens in what it is now, like in 9.2, I have to explain to my audience that version of my module will run until 9.2. And it's way easier to say, oh, this is fine for the DNN9 still, but DNN10, there's breakage. So if we do risk breakages, I'd love that to happen like at the .0 moments rather than anywhere in between.
Peter, I totally agree, and I would say that this is one point, and the other point is this needs to be announced in advance for developers, so module developers are able to download at least a nightly build, or we should have a beta where module developers are able to test their module against this build and check whether they have breaking changes and be able to provide fixed versions as soon as possible. That's my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to come to that point, because I think it's absolutely imperative that we're able to prepare. And one of the nice things, I think, one of the benefits of having a rigid process is that all module developers can be aware of that, right? We've got it written somewhere, and even in the method, when a deprecation method, we'll say, deprecated in version X, and you can calculate, okay, if it's deprecated in 6.1 because a new method was done there, then it's going to disappear in 8.0.0 or something like that. Like you can count on that method then disappearing, rather than because I'm as lazy as the next guy as a developer, and I'll just let that method simmer there until something happens, right? But if I know that that thing is going to disappear, my process also will be more structured and say, okay, well, I know that this will run until that version.
And I definitely think so. I mean, we already are doing part of that with the notes that are in there of, what version it was removed. But I also think that as important it is for the module developers, the module vendors and things like that, for them to be aware, I think that we need to be really careful on the communication to site administrators and those that are doing upgrades that are not developers. For example, I still think looking at the release notes when we go to GitHub, there is nothing in here that tells a non-developer that there's a breaking change.
Right.
And we need to be explicit about breaking changes. I don't care if it was, marked as removal prior to 7.0. I don't care if it was marked for removal at 1.0. The release that it was removed in is a breaking release potentially.
Yeah.
And people need to be made aware of that. In a perfect world, I would love that people actually took backups of everything and actually validated them.
Yeah.
But we've already dealt with a couple that didn't. And we are getting people much more paranoid because of all of the security stuff we're doing. We're not going to patch your old release, so you have to go forward, right? We kind of are getting people paranoid and getting them to a point where, but I've got to get upgraded because I've got to get this new security fix. And then if we don't call out something that's there, sometimes they don't catch it. And sometimes it's big, sometimes it's not. So as much as I want to make sure we have good developer communication, I do want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that in the end, ultimately, the one that pays the penalty is not the module vendor.
Right. So would you agree? I mean, that also kind of meshes very well, right, with that approach, because it means that it becomes very simple in your messaging and very consistent to these end users that a .00 version, which makes total sense, that there is more risk, right, with a .00 version. Exactly. I mean, we do that for our operating system. We react the same way for every software that we use. We know it's a .00 version. We're like, oh, okay, well, I'll wait until I have a week or something to look at this in more detail, rather than hit install and be done with it. So I think our the more consistent we can be in this approach, the easier and the more more trust we'll build with the end users, because they won't get fried in between, and they'll know then roughly how our cadence is, and obviously, of course, have the messaging around that as well.
Another subject, I think it's very important that we separate between bug fixing issues which are concentrated on bug fixing, and then focus on new features, because I told a couple of my clients they should wait for 9.2.0 because of lots of issues in DNN, previous DNN 9 versions, and I hope this was mainly a bug fixing issue. I knew about prompt, and I said, okay, that's a feature which wouldn't introduce much issues with the rest of DNN. There's finally a good page management, which is really needed by lots of people. And now we got a lot of problems with all the, with this removed features because people use a lot of old skins and other extensions, and now we have to take care that it doesn't break. So we need to set up all this makes a lot of headaches and doesn't make people confident in upgrades.
Yeah, exactly. So consistency in our versioning to what kind of, Matt, you wanted to say something, I think.
Yeah, I agree with the concept. I think the determination if there should be one version or two versions depends on how fast we get to a .0 release. And so my question to Ash is, are we still releasing something every 6 weeks, or is that the plan? And then, or every quarter? And then what constitutes, in the DNN Corp world, a .0 release?
Well, I mean, this .0 release is now, so going forward, I think the .0 release in my mind, and this is a good topic for discussion, is I think we're 9.2, maximum we can go 9.3. Ideally, the next .0, of course, is going to be 10.0, but what would that 10.0 look like? So here's what I'm thinking. I know we're talking about so many things, but 10.0, and you guys let me know what you feel about it. So if we can get the liquid content in there, in the platform, and what Andrew, and they're working about the Razor pages, do you think, is that good enough for a 10.0? Because we can't just call something a .0 release unless there was something in there. So 8.0 had MVC, right? 9.0 had the persona bar, right? That's how it has to be something substantial in there to call it. And then we can work on the timelines, right? So I don't know what you guys think about 10.0 with that feature set.
But my first reaction is I completely agree. Like the 10.0 should have something to market, to make it memorable, not just removing old methods, but also adding new major things that people are going to build on, basically. And I think what we would do in the meantime, and I think we do need to fill up some time before that, kind of replying to the moaning that's going on about the persona bar UI. So we could have a 9.3 and even 9.4 in between that make improvements and adjustments to the persona bar experience. And in the meantime, in parallel, work on a 10.0, which has the Razor pages and the liquid content in it.
Yeah, and also we could also, consider 9.2.1 as well, right? Because I do definitely have a backlog of number of bugs that are there, and people are asking to get it resolved and minor enhancements. So we could do 9.2.1, 9.2.2 as well. So again, we're not there to kind of make those decisions as to what the versioning is going to be, but that's kind of at a high level. And that's what I'm thinking. 10.0 is the liquid content and the Razor pages, if that works out. And provided that there is, there is a technical feasibility out there, right? Whether it's doable or not. I hope it's doable. And second, whether would people, now, I think Andrew's not here, so I'll ask this question here. Realistically, what do you guys think about that? Is that something, a good strategy? Razor pages, or do most of you agree that that is something that will help? Okay, so.
Yeah. You see, Razor pages is a developer feature, which helps developers to create new interfaces, and therefore it makes sense, of course, because it's not possible in the current version with the same interface. It makes sense to create a major feature, but on the same time, we need to have a major feature for the end users, so end users know why they're using DNN 10 in comparison to DNN 9. So that would be, for example, liquid content. So it makes sense to bundle stuff like this to make it to make as well end users as developers feeling okay. That's the next step. That's a new level we are reaching with DNN when we're going to DNN 10 or when we're targeting DNN 10. So I think that's a good strategy. But on the same time, we need to focus on bug fixing, because otherwise we will again get disappointments in the user base. And I just checked Jira, and I saw that, for example, that there seemed to be an issue with email, using email as user name. If this is broken in DNN 9.2, I haven't verified yet, but if that's broken, then that's for sure to release a DNN 9.2.1.
Oh yeah, there will be 9.2.1, 9.2.2 for sure. I mean, there will be more releases. So internally, and again, I don't know how realistic it is, there is a mandate to ship every 7 days. We're not going to be able to do that. So like there's a 13 shipping product every quarter. So there's a program to do ship every 7. That is the goal. That is the sort of from ESW perspective, they aspire to ship product to customer every 7 days, so they add value. Right? Can
I react to that? Because before we used to have DNN Corp with a, I remember this period very well, where the versioning was kind of driven by marketing, right? So they said, oh, but we should have a major version out this quarter, because basically it's the quarter. Whereas I think most of us in this group would agree that we would like to go for more semantic versioning, like, oh, we have if you have X, Y, Z in the version numbers, so a Y.0 release has minor or significant improvements in the platform where we try out some new stuff, etc. The .z kind of sequences are bug fixes. Basically, we're not removing stuff, we're not adding stuff, we're basically just fixing whatever is there. And the big ones are there that have potential breaking changes, right? The X version change is when, like 10.0, we have major new things coming out, and we do a big show around it. Now, how far are we free to choose those version numbers, or add together with you, or is that governed by ESW?
No, ESW doesn't have that kind of visibility at a very high level of organization. So from an organization perspective, is Andrew Triba is the CEO, and we have to still recommend him. That's why we're recommending, and he would mostly approve. Correct. Unless he sees a red flag. So we would have to go as me including this group, propose to him that this is what makes sense, and he will just weigh in from a community perspective and from his customer's perspective, our customer perspective, and very likely he'll say, yes, you guys are smart enough to make the right decisions. He would trust us. That's
so Ash, I guess I would have a question, and Peter, to you and the whole group. We're talking about next releases and then 10.0, but we're also talking about like getting Andy to approve. I think we kind of owe it to the community to like, hey, state this is where we're going for X release, and this is what we're targeting, because one of the main complaints is we don't have a visible roadmap, right? And if people understand that DNNTAG is now essentially setting the roadmap, then A, I think that will energize some people. And then B, the community will know who to quote unquote hold accountable for getting releases out.
Well, exactly.
So my question to you all is, and once everybody agrees kind of on what we want to do, is it too early to start communicating outwardly to the community? Okay, this is what we're targeting: 9.3, 9.4, then 10.
I think it's fair to, and definitely I wanted to use the DNN Connect event as well to target as like that. For me is like the very last moment that we should have at least the roadmap clear. We have a room full of people, we have their attention. That's the moment that we should have got our shit together. I think this group can frankly come up with a decent roadmap, a realistic roadmap. it's different when it comes to timing, I think, because gets more complex, because then you're talking about resources. But in terms of like putting flags, up, down the road and going like, okay, well, we want to reach this, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that. I think that is totally doable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that would excite a lot of people too. And if you aren't watching in the chat here, there's some good convo going in the chat about potential features. And I'm not saying that we should associate dates with any releases, but people can start to see the formulation of organization on behalf of the tag, right?
Yeah.
I'm fine with dates like early 2019 or something like this. We just need to provide our user base with an idea of what we're planning and where it's going to, because the acquisition of DNN Corp by ESW is now more than half a year, and it means that people now expecting some a new direction, and I think just one blog post is not enough to make people confident that we are proceeding. And therefore, I think one of the most important thing is now not only a new version. This is, of course, one of the great things which make people confident that it's proceeding. But on the other hand, we need to provide the roadmap where we're heading for, and of course, what will be the next steps.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we may could even create a Slack channel for each specific release, right? Talking about what features are supposed to be associated with it. Mandeep, thanks for joining, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you.
Yes, sir. But yeah, I mean, my whole thing is just about communication and transparency, right, with the community, because that's what they're asking for. And so I'm just...
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that should be visible as soon as we as soon as we agree on that here. And I think there is broad agreement already for those first two items on DNN10. So let's have a look at some of the other things that came up. So there's Mitch's list for smooth cloud running. That was promoted by Mitch himself. And
yeah, and I guess we're also talking about process too, right, Peter? I mean that
yeah.
Ash, if this group comes up with, I don't know, 4 or 5 things we want to include in 9.3 or 9.4, who is the ultimate sign off? I mean, like when do we get agreement? Because we all say when we all agree here, then we'll do something, right? But it's kind of like we don't know if we all agree because we're all not technically here in all the meetings. So if we come up with, I guess, a proposal or a spec, as you would like to call it, is that all that we need for, a stamp of approval? Or I'm just trying to figure out when is it the decision's made by DNNTAG? That's what I want to know.
I think you go to the game with the team that you have, right? And the team that we have are the people that show up to this meeting.
I agree.
So if other people wanted input, we can post it out there on a Slack channel, and like we've been doing.
Yep.
But yeah, we need to have some content, some-wise, coming out of this group for the community. Like this week.
And also, yeah, exactly. And also, Clint, I think what would be not too difficult to not kind of make this overly complicated. You could, in the Slack channel as well, announce that this specific meeting is going to be the one where we make the decision on X, Y, Z. And then it's up to those in the tag group that are like, oh God, I need to be there because I'm passionate about X, Y, or Z, that they actually show up, right? So if we say next week we finalize this, then we have a list. We make sure there's a proposal on the table by next week, and we agree within this forum, or we don't.
I think we will need a little bit longer to be realistic, Peter. I think we need to do a top-down approach where we say, okay, that's necessary for DNN10, and in my opinion, we are not yet ready. What will be the features? Then we may decide, okay, what other features are people want to contribute. And we should ask people to contribute things, and we need to have a process how people could propose features and how they get adopted. because that's something which is currently missing as far as I know. Maybe I missed something, but how do I propose a new feature? Like I submitted a document about user data improvement. How do I can start working on it, and in the end, Ash says, "Oh no, I don't want it," and you just made your effort for nothing. And of course, this is frustrating.
This is exactly that's a very important point. It's the fact that that process needs to be flexible enough that when someone comes along and says, "By the way, you know, I thought about enhancing this or that, or fixing this or that," that obviously we can put that in the roadmap at the right place and not be tied to what we said before.
So, Peter, back in the day in the core meetings, what was the attendance like in those? I would imagine they were well attended, and what I'm getting to is my reasoning is, if people understand that we're setting the direction, this group is setting the direction, then I think they will make a point to be here.
Right, but it wasn't. But back in the day, it wasn't very procedural either, right? It was pretty organic. I mean, basically, whoever did something had a lot of say on how that became, and obviously, Sean would decide, like, okay, does this go into this release or that release, etc., based on risk assessment of the whole team, right? And where, for instance, someone from either Cahal with for instance, the eye on security, and I would say, oh, I think I need to hold that off because I still want to look at this and this and this. So I'm definitely looking for that kind of a fluid process again.
Right. Are you suggesting, let's just say we take any release, like we just had 9.2, say 9.3 is upcoming. We put in a Slack channel, all right, there's going to be a meeting on this date, and this is when we're going to decide what's going to happen for 9.3. And if you care about it, then you show up there. Is that right?
Yeah, that would for me would be fine. And also, I think it would be nice to have a live document, basically the roadmap.
We can edit it like we did last week in the meeting, right? We had like 8 people editing the same.
Right, exactly. You can basically edit that at will, and that could be, for all I care, that could be public. Where we could already, if you like, in a very vagaries, like DNN10, okay, liquid content, Razor pages, module implementation. It's still very vague. People don't really know the specifics of it, but it's enough for them to go, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. I like where that's going. And have if you want to look further on the horizon, say, okay, well, DNN11, we're going to have, for instance, a revised DAO and whatnot, right? So we stake out various kind of things, but the closer it gets, of course, the more detailed this is, right?
Yep. No, I get that, and we've been doing a lot of talking. I want to open it up for the people who haven't been talking. How do y'all feel about what we're discussing here, as far as like how we get to a release and what features will be in it? All of y'all that are muted, what do you think?
So I guess I'm sitting here thinking, we can come together and say, we want XYZ feature in 9.3, but is that how do we get ESW to commit to that, or where is the ownership in that, so that it's not just us throwing around ideas that aren't going to actually happen? Do there need to be owners of features beyond just saying, hey, ESW, please do this stuff?
Yeah, I also think we need some kind of approval process for the idea, and then someone needs to approve and say, okay, this is in line with the general idea of DNN. This is with the general idea where we are going to, and it doesn't interfere with our ways. And once the idea is approved, then of course there needs to be someone implementing it. And as far as I understand, this will not be the ESW, so it needs to be users from the group working together, or maybe someone is as clever to do it just on his own. But finally, someone needs to approve it. Make sure that the code is working within DNN. We cannot rely just on third-party contributions being not breaking the compile, but or in the build. But of course, this needs to be tested. And what's the process for this? I think this needs to be fixed or it needs to be formalized.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest concern right now is what we've had from the longest, for the longest time, right? Which is we have to make sure that whatever direction we're going, if we want to emphasize on something, that if we're getting the community rallied around that, if we're seeking contributions, if we're seeking input on those areas, then we need to make sure that we have the support upstream from ESW or otherwise to ensure that those contributions are going to get there, right? The people that had stuff to contribute, the people that have done things and their pull requests were rejected, deleted, whatever the case may be, right? Those are the people that aren't going to come back. The people that say, okay, we're going to go this way, but then we get a zigzag and it takes a year, for what they did to get included, I think is one of the biggest things that we really do need this still concept of ownership or, really who's wearing the hat, right? Because what happens if we don't have that, especially as we go to make bigger changes, maybe not as much for a 9.3 release or a 9.2.1 release, but as we start to talk about a 10.0 release, we really need to make sure that we have that alignment. Because if we look at things like what Andrew's been working on, right? If we all decide, okay, Razor Page is the way to go, and then somebody says, boom, nothing, we probably wouldn't keep him around in the community with all of the effort that he's gone through with, as everybody kind of giving that a blessing. So I think we just need to make sure that we figure out how to address that. But right now, I still think, from my personal opinion, we're lacking some detail on exactly what that really looks like.
You mean detail on our relationship with ESW?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Can I say something, or do other people have some more comments?
No, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, so I think you guys heard from Andy, and again, I'm just saying on his behalf, is that he wants smaller DNN Corp, and he wants larger everything else, right? So again, and all of these things are going to be case by case. And I know Clint, you had asked me to write a blog about it, and I keep thinking whether I should write it or not, as to what is the right way to submit a pull request. And I mean, there are no rules as such that what I'm saying is that at the end it has to be case by case. I think, for example, let's just take ADA. In the corp, nobody is equipped to write a spec for ADA. Nobody knows what needs to be done. So this particular one has to be owned. And I believe at the DNN Summit, I think somebody had volunteered that they would write specs and they know exactly what needs to be done. I'm trying to remember who had said that. And so that has to come from the spec, has to come from community, and at least, and again, I may or may not document this because these things are evolving, and this maybe 1 year from now things will be very clear. But we want to have a group of at least 2 to 3 people looking at it and putting a concerted effort, not as a group like this where 10 people are looking at this saying, yeah, that looks good, that's fine. They have to have their skin in the game. They need to validate it. They need to argue within themselves. And then because this group, about 10 people here, then they can question that small group of 3 persons that, hey, did you guys do the due diligence that you had to do? What did you think about that? Did you think about that? So ADA, I am hoping that the community will do the spec, and I'm hoping that let's bring the spec here to this table and let's agree to it. without doing a lot of red tapeism, and we would have to get the community to build it. So the way internally how things work is at DNN Corp with ESW, I have a budget that I don't know if you've heard this before or not. The engineering at ESW works as a factory. It's literally, and the billionaire who owned it, he comes from Ford Motors and all that, right? He's written software for the enterprise software, and he wants to put the factory model here into software engineers. That's no one else does it. So I have to place orders in the factory, and there is a price list for everything that I do. And it can be expensive. It can be free at times. It can be very expensive. So new features are expensive because, generally speaking, they want to stabilize the product. If you want to run something faster, it's free for me. I don't have to pay for that. But I need to develop new feature. They ask, this is a mature company, right? Why? So what I'm trying to say is that I have a limited budget. I can only do that dollar amounts to get engineering done on really, really high value items.
Right.
So, and then everything is high value, right? So anything that comes from community saves me that dollar to do something else. Maybe you want to cut this off, go into after you upload this video, just internally right to this group. Well, so that's why we have to look into it case by case. So ADA, I would like to, and you guys can talk. And I attend these meetings every day, every week. The last one I was not here, so we can talk case by case. So ADA, whoever wants to take ownership, please take ownership and run with it, right? Run it like a project. You sell it, not necessarily sell it, but you bring it to this group's attention and get that done. And we will figure out a release where that needs to go. Maybe that's 9.3. That's a decent feature. And likewise, cloud support, we'll talk about that separately. Sebastian, I know you have a SQL update, and I'll tell you, I'll be very upfront. I'm usually skeptical about that. And just because of breaking changes and whatnot. So if you want to champion that, again, not to pick on you, if you want to champion that, go ahead and do that. Work with a person or a group of persons who has the same motivation and passion to critique you and help make sure that that is the right thing, not only for yourself or your customer, but the larger community.
Right.
So
right.
That's how I feel we're going to be proceeding. And from Andy Tribber's perspective, he wouldn't be able to kind of zoom into all of those details, right? No. So as long as we have a comprehensive voice, a unified voice, though, we need to have concrete.
Can I just chip in here? The way it used to work in V1 of DNN, right? When you talk about the core team days, is that if you had a brilliant idea, you would first need to find someone within Corp who had access to the vault, and there were 4 people off the top of my head. Vicens and Cahal, for instance, right? They had access to actually commit code. Now, of course, with GitHub, the doors are open, but it doesn't mean, and I think that's something that people may too gratuitously think about, that it doesn't mean we can just accept any pull request that comes in, right? It kind of goes without saying, but we have a hard time managing the size of the code base. So people might come in with some wonderful ideas for new features, but that we don't feel like if you would have really a strategy for the platform, that at that point you could say, well, this doesn't really fall within the mission of the platform, for instance, and you would need to reject something like that because it adds code and you don't know if that person is going to stay around. You're going to have to manage that code going forward, etc. So there's a lot of stuff to think about when you're accepting stuff, and that's why I felt that the old situation at least had this. It made it go a little bit slower because you had to work through other people. In other words, you did need to create, like what Ash was talking about just now, you need to create a team of people before this goes in. And then you discuss it within this group, so you get it on the roadmap. So then you have commitment by by the team that this is actually going to go in, which avoids the situation that Sebastian was hinting at, which was, oh, you go away and do a lot of work, then all of a sudden, it's no can do. Your work gets rejected, and you're never going to come back. So this approach is, I think, crucial, right? How we manage that process and the role that this group plays in managing that and helping Ash, because I don't think one person can, frankly, basically judge everything that comes in.
Peter, I totally agree, and I think it's very important that we have an idea. We need every new feature, and any improvements need to be tested against the general direction of DNN, because otherwise, of course, there are lots of developers who use DNN as a development platform and say, okay, for my use case, I would like to have this. For my use case, I would like to have that. And then at the end, we will end up with a bloated solution which can do everything. No one understands, and no one really, and very few people uses, and I think that's something we want to avoid. And I think there are very few people in the community at the moment, mainly in this group, who understand what the general directions, the general idea of DNN is. And it's very important that there is a smaller group which is taking a look. Is this aligned with our idea, or is this not? For example, MySQL stuff, I can do. I'm someone who says, okay, I will do lots of stuff in a SQL server, because that's what I'm good at, and that's where I can improve it. While, for example, Sean would say, oh, this is not stuff for the SQL server, I would like to do it in the API. This is something which needs to be decided, because when I'm contributing it as a finalized improvement, I would be pissed off if someone says, okay, that's nice, but I like to do it a different way, and therefore we do not integrate it. We will not, I will come up with a solution maybe next year or the year after, but at the moment we will not follow your road, and thank you for your contribution, but we will not include it, we will not improve our solution. It doesn't, so it's a difficult situation, and we need to find a situation or a formalized process, how new features can be suggested, how they get approved, and then how, of course, the solution gets verified. That's my idea.
I totally agree.
Of course, and I do volunteer for being part of this group who approves it, because I think I'm one of the who's of the people who's with DNN for a long time, and I think you are as well, and Sean, of course, and maybe we get a few others, Ash, of course, because he can bring in the vision of DNN Corp. But we need a group of people, which should be about between 6 and 10 people, I think, because otherwise it's difficult to discuss. And to at least make a proposal for this group, and where we can finally provide this, provide our ideas.
Yep.
Approval.
All right. Process. So anyway, it's good to know that Mitch will be joining you on that effort.
Yeah, I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of, on the SQL side, I've got a lot of Microsoft recommendations that we've been implementing for a number of years. So,
yeah, sounds good.
So what are we looking at right now?
So I shared my screen, and Ash, this is the document that Matt created on the fly here during the meeting, just to try to get some action and documentation going. So it's just kind of like pointing back to the earlier conversation of what are we communicating outwardly, what are we attempting to do, and the guys are here editing the document.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why I'm anonymous from my goal right now.
Orangutan?
I think it's good for us to discuss when evoke versions will be released. I think that's nothing we can do, because that's simply that's just a corp decision, right?
Well, I mean, Evoke and DNN platform will go at the same time. There was a time when the versions were different, but now it's the same version.
Okay. So but it's a question to you. Do you agree with us? Would you adhere to our release schedule? Because that would require that DNN that the corp is now following the release schedule, of course, by the community, because lots of those things will be driven by the community out of necessity, as far as I understand. Yes, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is no hard and fast rule, right? Whether we have to follow this or that. I mean, we will have to treat case by case, and in some cases we have to see when we, ready to cross the bridge, right? So that's why we have to take like small steps and one feature at a time, like a couple of features. If you think about 2 years out, it is too early to say anything there, right? So let's look into our specific use. I mean, so far it looks very aligned, right? Anything when there is no alignment, I will call it out, right?
But it's also it's hard to imagine that we wouldn't align. I mean, it's a bit silly. We're all in the end, we're all after more or less the same thing,
right?
So, and also the way I see it, and I think that's how all of us should see it. I mean, DNN Corp is at the moment just another player in our ecosystem, one that holds more sway than others, but still with us, right? And in that sense, I welcome that development, and I think this group will be fine playing this role of hammering out the roadmap, and you can take that to Andy, and I'm fairly confident that if we don't do something completely stupid, that Andy was going to go like, yeah, of course, this sounds good.
I think, Clint, we need a DNN platform 9.21 included in the list as well. And why would you?
Feel free to type it.
Yeah, exactly.
Type here.
Type.
Sorry?
Type English, Sebastian.
It's a Google Doc. Anyone.
Hi.
And of course, it's my question now. Would my improvements for SQL, would they go into 9.3 or would they be possible for 9.21? They do not. I don't try to break the DNN API, but I will break the modules which do access the database. Might affect modules which will break access to the DNN database directly. What we officially say we try to avoid, but even DNN is not very good at it.
So definitely not in a 9.2.1.
Okay.
Yeah, so work with the group. I think Mitch has volunteered, so you guys should. I mean, you should also say why you're doing it, right? Because I saw. To be honest, Sebastian, we'll have to be frank here. Some of these I didn't really understand the rationale behind, adding a few audit columns. We've survived with that 10 years. I mean, what's the point of adding it now? Is it really adding value, or is it just we feel we have to be semantically correct? I mean, I think that has gone. I mean, it has gone without it for 10 years. Why now?
Right.
So are we adding bloat, or are we adding real value to the product? I think we have to see from that perspective as well, because this is otherwise a very stable product.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm trying to make DNN ready for the next version by this, of course. That's one of the points. And the second point is if it's not consistent in the database, it's difficult on everything built on top.
I understand, Sebastian, but at the same time, you know.
And of course, the second problem is that we do have a lot of bugs in DNN, which might not affect everyone. But I noticed it when I looked at the code that this is a possible issue in the future. We have a few safety cons around it, but it doesn't really make sense. And if you're going to make if we want to proceed and we want to make people to be confident in DNN, in my opinion, it makes sense to fix these conceptual issues.
Right, but as Ash, just wait for a sec. As Ash was hinting at already, I mean, there's a difference between various interventions you want to do, and some of them are bug fixes, or for instance, wanting to make the product quicker, and others are, let's say, cosmetic interventions where you say, well, you know, this thing should be similar to that thing. I agree, but it's not the same kind of intervention. And therefore, they would not necessarily sit at the same version.
Yeah, but of course,
I would really like us to critique really hard on the value, the business value, or whatever value, developer value, whoever our customers are. You know, developers are our customers.
Absolutely.
What value are you adding it? You know, if it doesn't add any value, there's no point adding that.
Let's first see a presentation on what you want to do.
Sorry, I provided you with a document, and if you have questions, please come to me. But I'm not going to do a huge discussion and providing what the benefit for each small change is. This doesn't make sense for me.
So I think, Sebastian, first of all, I think you've uploaded.
Sorry, Ash. I put in a list of 12 points. If you have a question on each point, please provide me with your question. And I think this is the right group where we can discuss it, or maybe a subgroup or anyone else. But of course, I would like to have this being approved before I start working on it.
Yeah, so Sebastian, I think first of all, you've submitted a PDF, right? We need a open document like that where people can come in and add comment. I mean, I wanted to comment, but I had no place to comment. I didn't want to go into an email thread, and it's not a good use of everybody's time to look into one document. We should do that offline. The small group, they should all approve, right? Whoever the small group is, right? But I think we should make it as a Google Doc so it is editable, and so people can add comment as well.
Yeah.
That's something that was missing to me because I didn't know how to put it on discussion.
Okay. I want to know, what are we targeting about UI UX update? Who brought that up?
I think I did, in the sense, in a more vague term, which is to address several gripes that are within the community regarding the persona bar implementation. So, you know, some people still miss some aspects that weren't carried over into the new UI. We've had a strategy, I believe, when I talked to Joe about prompt, he said, well, you know, we'd like to offload some stuff to prompt in the management of DNN. Fair enough, but then we need to be clear about that, and it needs to be implemented in prompt. And I think that I think it will be fairly easy to do because there's now quite a bit of experience with persona bar, so there's quite a bit of feedback from people who have missed certain features. And I think if you just throw the fish out there, that there'll be a lot of people who will bite on that and give you a work list.
And I'm still of the opinion that we need some kind of a new UI UX group, because this is a very, very important feature of DNN. And I think we need to get Timo on board again, who is really great in this stuff, and to get forward into this direction, because it's really
right. But that sits at a different level, that discussion, Sebastian. Because I'm, you know, obviously we need the right people to decide about these things. and to provide input about these things. But right now we're just talking about kind of a high level, abstract level, like what we'd like to do in terms of a roadmap. What could we communicate to the outside world as points of focus for our next releases. And certainly when we're talking about a 6-7 day release cycle, those .1 releases are probably going to be just bug fixes, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I will say one thing, right? I think the UI, UX guys, I think we're not going to be able to make major updates, right? Because I mean, UI, UX, that's 9.0, right? And it was just going to be incremental here and there, right? If the missing,
yeah, exactly. It's like it's missing buttons and missing
right. Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and some of it's feature related too, not so much, it's just what's surfaced through the UI versus, true UX work. It's really more of getting some of those key features that a lot of us use on a daily basis that are now gone back in.
Yeah.
Guys, I know we're kind of pushing up close to an hour, and I'm sure some of you have meetings and have to drop off and stuff. So as far as like summarizing what we've done here in today's meeting, I mean, does everybody feel like we've made a little bit of progress as far as like establishing a process? Everybody, I hope you continue to update and edit this document, after the meeting, because we need to set a date for when we want to try to target this. And then if these are the items that we want to try to take on, then who's going to own them? And then we can, refine the process, things like that. So I just want to be respectful of everybody's time here.
Yeah.
So is there any other items that we need to, kind of discuss?
I think, Clint, I think we need to put the priority as well. So if for example, GDPR should be the #1 priority here, right? In the ADA compliance. So I didn't really click on this link. So for 921, thank you for adding GDPR, but that should be the #1 priority.
Right.
And definitely we need to see what the community is offering here in terms of either a spec or code.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's going to be important for us to like I said, communicate this outwardly, but then ask for help from community members, partners, developers, like whoever is passionate about this stuff. We've got to start on that.
Well, I know someone who wrote a blog post about GDPR, and he's present in this call.
Yes.
I still have to contribute my GDPR issue. So item, sorry, Ash, I haven't got the time yet. I will do this in the next day. Sorry.
Yeah. So Sebastian, that is more important than your SQL, to be honest, because there is a ticking time bomb there.
Yeah.
I won't do I won't be able to do my SQL improvements within the next couple of days. This is, of course, a bigger issue or subject, and this is not something I'm just taking from my Turbo scripts into DNN Core. That's not the subject. It's issues which go beyond the Turbo scripts, because I'm not modifying the schema in DNN of the DNN database, but this would be part of my improvements I suggested in this document.
Right. Okay. So GDPR for next meeting. I think Mitch bowed out already of the.
I have to jump off too, guys.
And Mitch Sellers, I'm talking about. And Mitch wrote a long article about it. About GDPR and the consequences for DNN. So if he agrees, it'd be nice to have him involved in that as well.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Well, Peter, I was just going to ask, if we're going to try to do this in 9.3, then that will need some time and some love from a certain group of people who are more vocal, right? So if we publish this, are you guys like, well, obviously we're posting this video, so this will be out here, right? But, more so promoting this, I guess, being open.
open documents. The thing is,
the thing is, we probably need to lock down the security a little bit on this because you don't want everybody editing it, and that's what working right now. So maybe Matt, you could do that.
Yeah, I can.
I know it'll take a little bit of time, but
Yeah,
just getting at least this team,
Yeah, Matt, I can easily give you all the email addresses of everybody in this group if that helps you.
But there's a
yeah, that would help.
I thought we had a Google Drive that we are all privy. Oh no, that's
no, that's one of the other groups, I believe, Peter.
okay. Not
well, we can. I mean, I've got a drive for this group. We can do it. I could just move this. But
if you drop it in there, that means automatically all of us have access and edit.
Yeah.
But
into the document in Slack, I think the others in the discussion get access automatically as well.
Yeah. So you put dates in, and I think that is really too early. I think the important part is to discuss the path, and because dates depend on resources, and as soon as you start to nail,
there are no dates listed. It's just
yeah, I know, but you're raising the question. So in case that goes public, that's going to be the first question. So hey, that wasn't filled in. What do you think?
I think for maybe the roadmap, we can just go, here's the high level stuff we're going to probably put into it, and then we have individual documents, I guess, for each release that we assign ownership and stuff through, I guess.
Yeah.
Or what JIRA items we're going to work on, or make high priority or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So Matt, you are very difficult to understand. Sorry.
Sorry.
Very fast. Sorry.
Yeah. All right.
One point I'd like to bring up, just where we need to consider, for example, about situations, how we deal with subjects. For DNN 920, I provided an update of the procedure, a sort procedure in DNN persona bar, which retrieves the users. And I suggested moving it back to DNN Core, and DNN Core wanted it to be kept in the data provider of the persona bar extension for users. And in my opinion, that doesn't make sense. I tried to put different user retrieval procedures back into one interface. Now we get a lot of differences, and it makes it very difficult, in my opinion, for module developers and for others to deal with users if we try to access our if we split our API through across DNN framework and some persona bar extensions and things like this. I think within DNN it doesn't make sense.
Well, we're going to rethink all of that anyway with the move to .NET Core. So I don't know if it makes sense to do a lot of reshuffling now when all of that's going to be up in the air as soon as we start working on that.
Yeah, maybe Ash has an idea of why, but in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to have a module who's looking for users, having an interface which is kept totally separate from DNN Core and just accessing the database directly, using its own data provider, using its own stored procedures.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess we probably need to wind this meeting down. I think people have stuff to do here. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will continue to update this and keep the conversation going. Appreciate everybody's time.
Yep. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you guys.
See you.